Hi, we're back. Bolo's Musing with Drew Ann Love and Christopher Zagorski. Today we're going to do something different. We're actually going to talk about one book. The name of the book is The First to Lie by Hank Phillippi Ryan.
And then later, after we talk about our book, we're going to have Hank join us for a short question and answer. So be sure to stick around for that. But first, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the book, and then Drew will do the same. Look, it's no secret Hank Phillippi Ryan never fails to deliver whatever she's writing. In The First to Lie, she presents readers with a collection of characters, all of whom are lying. They're lying to each other, they're lying to themselves, they're lying to their loved ones, to society, and maybe they're even lying to the reader. For a large chunk of the book, at the beginning, readers hear a tale about three women, Ellie, Meg, and Nora, who are all circling the same story, but for seemingly different reasons. That story involves a pharmaceutical company and one of their drugs in particular. As we read, we meet the men in their lives, some waiting room patients and the doctors treating them, the executives at Pharmanex, and as we find out more about why these women are doing what they're doing, you get drawn into the tale. A quarter of the way into the novel, Hank throws in two more perspectives. These are from the past. Both are tied to the family that owns the pharmaceutical empire, one by birth and one by marriage. How these individuals mesh with the earlier three protagonists and their particular cast of characters is slowly revealed as the twisted legacy of this family comes to light. Hank has told us with her title that lies play a pivotal role in the plotting of this suspense thriller. But if no one is telling the truth, why does it matter who lied first? But it does. Hank skillfully keeps most everything readers need to know under wraps for most of the novel, until that moment when the plot magically coalesces into a devastating picture and readers find themselves furiously flipping through the pages with shocked expressions upon their face.
It's really good. The First to Lie, a smorgasbord of subterfuge throughout. You don't know who is telling the truth, nor do you know what they are hiding. It is what made this psychological thriller dramatically consuming as the narrative propelled me towards the frenetic ending that I could not put down until all was said and done. What took this riveting and grippingly intoxicating thriller to a higher level is how cleverly the author led us on a chase, and once the truth was revealed, I relished in it all its worthiness. Bravo. Well done.
I completely agree. I need to ask you, Drew, let's talk about the book a little bit. At what point did you think that you started to know what was going on, and were you right when you first thought of it, or were you wrong? Without spoilers, of course.
No, not at first. But once the story kept going, I thought I knew what was going on until I didn't know what was going on, and then I didn't know what was going on. So it was a matter of just having all the pieces fall into place. Then I knew kind of what was going on. But Hank likes to do those little twisty things. So yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah, early on, I had a suspicion about something and I was correct, but then something else made me change my mind. So I actually thought I knew what was going on, and I did, but then I changed my mind until I came back to it again later and said, why didn't I trust myself at the beginning? But I did not have a lot of the stuff at the end figured out, which is why those last 100 pages flew by, because I was like,
it went fast. It went fast because you just wanted to know. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, as soon as they started coming, I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. And I didn't see that. And then another one, and then another one.
Right.
And then, like I said, some of the things that I did think were there and they tied in, but not in the way I thought. So I found that.
Right.
But that's just a trademark of what Hank has been doing with these psychological thrillers.
Yeah, she basically pulls you in and have you going one way, but then leads you a different way, and then it's your guest versus her guest.
Right, exactly. And who's lying and why are they lying?
Yeah.
All right, let's bring Hank in here and have a few questions and answers with her and let the readers get her perspective.
Cool. I think that's a good idea.
Hi, Hank. Thanks so much for joining us today on Bolo Musings.
Thank you. I see that I don't have the quilt motif in the background. I promise I'll do that the next time. That is absolutely gorgeous.
Okay, yeah, you
Thank
get on
you.
that all your spare time making a quilt. All right, we just have a few questions for you. Drew, why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay. Hi, Hank. Here's my first question. Did you have the title first or the story?
That is such a good, smart question because it has the craziest answer. I was writing my previous book, The Murder List. And in that book, the police and someone else, another character, are talking about what happens when someone makes a deal in a case. And someone says, well, you know, the first to talk is the first to walk, meaning the first to rat someone out is the first one to get a better deal. And my character says, yes, but what about the first to lie? And I thought, oh, what about the first to lie? What about that? So truly, and I can tell you because it's just us three, I had that title before I knew one thing about the book. Isn't that so crazy magic?
That is crazy.
That's great.
And it ties nicely with the previous book, so that's great too.
Yeah.
All right, my first question is, when we read a book that has points of view, multiple points of view, it's always so important that the voices are distinct and different for each of those characters, so much so that often the reader should be able to tell who's talking, even if the chapter didn't have those little headings telling us who's talking. And I have to imagine for this book, for reasons that are too spoilerish for us to go into, that was even more of a challenge. But I want to know, does the voice come to you when you're writing it, or is that something that you hone more in revision to make sure that what the characters are saying sound like what that character should sound like?
A little bit of each. Actually, that is interesting. When I'm writing a character, it is, if I'm lucky, it's a time where it seems like that character's being and self and brain are coming through me and out my fingers onto the keyboard. You all will understand this, but that is exactly how it feels. And when that is working, my characters are, I am those characters, and I am saying those things as the person, as Ellie, as Nora, as Meg, as Brooke, as Lacey. I am being that person. So it's not only the words they say, but it's their thought process, what they want and how far they'll go to get it and what their goals are, because that has to suffuse every bit of what that person says. So I'm being that person. It's almost like method acting as an author. I'm being that person. And so I'm hoping that what happens is that they come out on the page authentically as that person. Now, of course, as you were so wisely brought up, as an author, later in the revisions, I'll go back and make sure that, that only one character says, I know, right? That only one person gets that. Only one person language may be a little tougher, or only one person has very short sentences, or only one person uses a certain expression. So I don't worry about that too much when I'm in the just being the person stage. But then later, I try very hard to differentiate the attitude and the tone and the sort of the education of the person and how they see the world. Whether someone would say, "Oh, look, she has on a white Vera Wang tulle dress," or "Look at that fluffy white dress." I mean, that's based on what that person knows, and so
Right.
that's how I do it. That's how I try to make it different. I do love in my books and in other people's books when there is that title that says whose brain we're in. Especially in an audiobook, it's a good moment to reorganize your brain, to set yourself, okay, now I'm Nora. Now I'm Ellie. So I do think that's important, but I agree with you, Christopher, that you shouldn't need it, but why not have it if you can?
Oh yeah, I definitely think it's good. And you're right, I never thought about it from the audiobook perspective, because when you're reading it, you can see visually that you're starting a new chapter and you're like, well, maybe it's a different voice. You don't really know, but maybe. And that is a clue to tell you that. But in an audiobook, you don't have that advantage. Okay, my second question, people have already heard my review, so they already know that I loved the flashback sections of the book. They were my favorite part of the whole section, of the whole novel. So I have a question. As a Baltimorean, I grew up with the Chesapeake Bay and Annapolis as part of my backyard. So those flashback sections that take place there are great. Those vignettes gave me vibes of the Kennedy family and even some of the Chappaquiddick incident and those kind of things. So, but I couldn't help noticing when I was reading that they kept going back to National Bohemian Beer. So first I want to ask if you've ever had a Natty Bo, and then I have to ask, were you thinking of these prominent families and their scandals that often have happened?
Well, it's yes to all, and thank you, because it's really, really fun for me to, it was really, really fun for me to write those sections, because again, you know, I take myself to that sailboat. I take myself to those parties and the chilled shrimp and the just right brie and the white wine and the sort of privileged halls of people with caterers and people with sailboats and what that life is like. Natty Bo, I have to say, I have not. I'm not much of a beer person, but I think when this book comes out, I will have to find some to celebrate. But that's all, you know, that's all part of authenticity. You know, I talked to a lot of people who live around there and who have lived around there. And I said, tell me about it. Tell me what the feeling is. Tell me how it is to be there. What beer would you grab that somebody who has lived there for a long time and is authentically loves beer and local beer, what would they want? You know, how would that be? How can I make this be authentic? So, you know, this is all about the research. This is all about immersing myself in beer and sailing and those families and, you know, the Eastern Shore, all Chesapeake Bay, all that, the yacht clubs. Those parts of the book, those backflash part of the books, and I don't like to say flashback or backflash or going back or historic, because to me, those chapters were written as the now of then, that you are present in them then. It is the now of you. It's not somebody remembering or telling a story about it to someone else, or, oh, I remember when this happened. It's really just, okay, here's a story that took place then and here. And yes, of course, Christopher, those elegant, historic, privileged families. When I worked on Capitol Hill in the 70s, I worked for the Administrative Practice and Procedure Subcommittee of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I know. And the chairman of that committee was Senator Ted Kennedy. So I worked with him, and Caroline Kennedy was my intern. And I had a lot of time at Hickory Hill and in those kinds of milieux. So yeah, I get that, and I know that. It was a wonderful experience for me. Working on Capitol Hill really taught me how to think. But it also taught me how people live when their lives are so incredibly privileged. I mean, Caroline Kennedy, her father is on our currency. You know, her father is on the money.
Right.
I kept thinking about that. How elevated that is. So yes, I tried to infuse those parts of the book with that really insider knowledge of how those people's lives work or don't.
Excellent. I love those sections. I could have stayed back there. I was like, oh, this is so wonderful.
That's cool. My second question is, why psychological thriller?
You know, that is a good question. And I know that that's how I know that that's what they are. And I know that that's how they're branded. And I embrace that so completely and totally. But, you know, my books have won the Mary Higgins Clark Award and the Agatha and the Anthony. And part of the deal of that is a sensibility of a book. So there's no graphic sex, there's no graphic violence, there's not too much inappropriate language, but what there is mind games and gaslighting and deception and the power of our brains and the power of desire and the power of our motivation and how we as human beings can work to get somebody to do what we want them to do. And how is that, you know, and how fascinating is that? You know, that kind of mental manipulation is just as powerful and way more insidious than a knife or a gun or some sort of big bang threat. This is the insidious spider webby work. When a person is, and we all know people like this, people who are so creepily self-centered and motivated that they can get you to believe that the world is different from how you know it is. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe you've made a mistake. Oh no, how did you not see it that way? Oh, I guess they were right. And they are lying to you up one side, down the other, and they know it, and they're watching you fall for it. And I think, in getting back to your wonderful question, and I think that's what's fascinating to me. If you look at the Agatha Christie books, those are psychological thrillers too. That's how people work on each other. That's how people affect each other. That's how people get what they want, is by manipulation and gaslighting. So yes, of course, that completely fascinates me. I mean, my books still have, there's still murders in them. There's still mysteries in them. There's still fast-paced thrillers. I mean, I want you to miss your stop on the bus because you're so engrossed in this entertaining book. But at the core, yes, it is gaslighting and manipulation and deception and psychology, flat out psychology.
Ooh, thank you.
All right, I'm going to end here with a really nerdy question because that's just who I am. Most of your fans know from previous interviews that you never know what's going to happen in your books. You're just writing them and you're as surprised as everybody else. And you've always said that if you're surprised, hopefully the reader is equally as surprised. But as a reader and somebody who's not writing, I wonder, how do you then know that you've reached the end? If you don't know where you're going, how do you know when you've got there? Because in this book in particular, there was a story that could have gone on, which would have been interesting because we are now in a situation where different things are going on. But it was a good ending point for the novel. So I just wonder, how do you know if you don't know where you're going when you're there?
Yeah, you're making me very confused, Christopher. I mean, because you're so right about that. But there is a flow to a story. And in a standalone, one of the things about writing a standalone, like The First to Lie is a standalone. There's only one, this is the most important thing that's ever happened to these people in their lives. The biggest, most tectonic, gorgeous, important, riveting, compelling thing that's ever happened. But what we're seeing in a standalone is a slice of that life, right? So there was, these people had lives before the book because they're real. And because they're real, they have lives after the book. So we can imagine their lives before and after. But what we're hearing is the story of right now and why this particular thing happened and how this particular engine got turned on and went into the air. I'm now losing myself in this terrible metaphor. But we're hearing this one gorgeous gem of a story. So when those tendrils of the story are braided together at the end in a kind of seamless way, and we feel satisfied, that's when I knew this part of, Meg and Ellie and Nora and Gabe, of their story, that was over. And seriously, my writer's self, when I write the first draft and then I write all the edited drafts and write and tweak and polish and go on and on and on about it obsessively. But so far in every book, knock on wood, so far, there's a moment in the editing when I'm just reading the story and I forget that I wrote it. I'm just reading the book and I think, okay, sister, you're done. Yeah. That is how, and often, always, tears come to my eyes. I mean, I really feel this big moment of, yeah, that's the end. And I felt that in The First to Lie so deeply. So how do I know? I don't know how I know. But I have recognized the moment in all of my 12 books, the moment when I forgot I wrote it. And I'm just as immersed in the story as I hope all the readers are.
Yeah, I think it's a testament that they really are real characters. I mean, they do come
Yes.
alive, and that's why I guess I want to know more about what's happening in their lives, which will go on in my mind, and I can make that happen, and they can do whatever I want them to do because those characters are now my characters to
Right.
live with forever because I've read the wonderful book.
You had me at wonderful, and if you want to talk about what happens, I'll be glad to chat.
Oh.
Well, thank you so much, Hank, for
Thank
joining
you.
us on our first episode that we've dedicated to one book. So that's exciting.
I'm so honored
Thank
that
you.
the first to lie was the first to be alone with you two. I love that. Congratulations on your wonderful program. It's absolutely terrific. We all love it, and we thank you both so much for all you do. You're so important in our world, and we're very grateful.
Oh, thank you
No,
so much.
thank you.